it is the cumulative impact, because Barbados is going to experience it, because as people are retiring now, Madam Deputy Speaker, as people are retiring now, you ain't got enough people coming up with the training, the experience, because the last administration in the short-sightedness created some issues. We have had to redouble our efforts, and within the construction gateway program, as well as the program for AI and cybersecurity and these things, we are building skills for the future today. And therefore, we have to prepare our young people for the fact that the jobs that we are in today may not be the jobs that be available even next year. Because technology is changing so rapidly that we must keep pace. But we should not fear it, Madam Deputy Speaker, because if Barbadians have, and I know the member for St. Philip West is, and the team at the Ministry of Education is working to make the changes within that space, because any child that comes through our education system must know they could go any part of the world or stay in Barbados and be world class. But that confidence comes not from how much you get on the 11 plus, Madam Deputy Speaker. It comes from an innate confidence, because the system ought to be focusing on what are your strengths, how do you get those strengths out over the course of 12 to 14, 15 years, depending on how long you're in the system, Madam Deputy Speaker. And once you can unlock the potential of those young people, Madam Deputy Speaker, then we will be producing more Sagaris, more Rihannas, more of the world-class leaders that we have produced in this country. And therefore, the social inclusion component, Madam Deputy Speaker, is critically important. And therefore, when we do the debt to release more monies and more resources to put into education and health and these things, you can't get the macro, Madam Deputy Speaker, without the micro, and vice versa. And therefore, there is no separation. And I want to say to Barbadians that we have put a lot of time and effort into training, and we will continue to be able to do that to make sure that we can get a lot of as they would say, a better bang for your buck. Green economy transition, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you know, we've had some challenges with respect to access to technologies. This is something that we have been, especially in battery storage, given the nature of what's been happening globally. We passed the Electricity Supply Act a few weeks ago as part of the regulatory updates, if you like, to be able to advance that. This government, 4 years ago, made a very clear determination that we will purchase electric or hybrid vehicles for our fleet. We took that decision. And then we extended, with respect to the rest of the public, oh no, it was 2020, but 4 years ago, we extended to the rest of the public that we will give the incentives to focus on that transition from the transportation perspective. And therefore, we will continue on this journey to allow us to be able to reduce the amount of fuel that we are importing, to be able to help save some of the same foreign exchange that we're talking about, Madam Deputy Speaker. And therefore, these are just some of the examples of how we have to not just green the transportation, but within the hotel sector, as new hotels are being built, they're required to install water treatment facilities. They're required to green and digitize their entire sets of facilities, such that the focus now is that from inception, things are as sustainable as possible. And the reality of it, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that it just makes sense. And therefore, I know that once we can get access to greater battery capacity, we'll be able to see more people being able to make investments in this particular space to be able to be able to participate. Now, let me also say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I am well aware that within the agricultural sector, for example, there are a number of, and I know a number of chicken farms operating. With the capacity, I know there is already some work being done to take the chicken manure that is thrown away quite regularly, Madam Deputy Speaker. You mix that with some of the planting material. I know one of the facilities are using cotton, and the full, so you pick the cotton, Madam Deputy Speaker, yes, you pick the cotton, but you use the rest of the plant in a biodigester to produce electricity and natural gas. Now, that automatically means, yes, you've got to make some investment, but it means a different revenue line for the farm, because you could put electricity straight into the grid, or give the gas to NPC for them to sell. And therefore, the idea of inclusion is important. Therefore, we are making resources available to be able to help people to transition along this way. So there are lots of innovation happening in Barbados, and therefore, we must not see ourselves in the traditional sense in order for us to be able to see this green economy transition come to fruition, and therefore have a much more sustainable business practices as well as environmental practices in relation to this. And the last one, Madam Deputy Speaker, is digitization. All linked, by the way, Madam Deputy Speaker, all linked. Now, let me just say that this government has prioritized digitizing, and you know, people can get tired of me saying this, you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, but you know, if anybody wants to go to the United States, you have no choice but to go online, fill out a form. It takes you about 45 minutes at least to fill out the form and pay. And hope that when you get the appointment, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you will get the visa. But the only way you can get to the United States is if you go through that process. Now, the government is not going to do anything that's going to make anybody fill out anything for 45 minutes. But our efforts to link our databases and to provide digital services, notwithstanding, Madam Deputy Speaker, that obviously as you digitize, you have to take account for the fact that there are criminals out there intent on disrupting digital services, and therefore we are cognizant of the fact that there are cybersecurity threats. But you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that whether you're in an analog space, because a thief is a thief is a thief is a thief, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether you're a thief in cyberspace, or you're just a regular analog thief, a thief is a thief is a thief. Anybody that is out to do ill will find a way to do it. And therefore, in the same way that you have to put in the safeguards within the so-called analog space, we equally put in the safeguards within the digital space. And therefore, the world having moved in this direction, it is incumbent upon not just government institutions, but private sector institutions and others to be able to address this. Now, I say this very cautiously, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it is important that we know who to trust. It's important. So I received a text message on my phone telling me, welcome to something, something, something. Please call the number on the back of your card, blah, 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 blah. So I see the message. I got to my office, and my secretary tells me that somebody calls to say, call this number. When I call the number, Madam Deputy Speaker, the number says it's out of service. So I called what my credit card center, and I inquired, did somebody was trying to contact me. And they verified that nobody from their team was trying to contact me. So I'm saying to Barbadians, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are people out there every day who are up to no good. And whilst we cannot turn back the clock as it comes to digitization, we must not be gullible and give our information to anybody on the phone unless you know that you're doing business with them. And in this day and age, with the way that technology has evolved, all of us have a responsibility to check. Don't assume, because I have had multiple times where people call me and say, Minister, the grant that you're asking about, where to send the information. They said, what you were Grant you're talking about? And just take a screenshot and show a picture of me saying to the person, Madam Deputy Speaker, that they got a grant of $5,000 or $50,000 available from the government, and all you got to do is give this set of information. I said the government don't operate so. And certainly I don't operate so. And therefore, I'm saying to citizens that as we go down this journey of becoming more digitally literate and to be able to do business more efficiently, please, before you take up your money and send it to somebody on the internet somewhere, because there's a nice ad, Madam Deputy Speaker, telling you about these great returns, and they got some models on there that will probably turn your head if you're so in tune. Before you take up your hard-earned money and give to a stranger, please. I know the Honourable Member for St. James South, having started the Financial Literacy Bureau, please call somebody and ask a question. There's no shame in asking a question, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's no shame in asking a question. If you don't ask the questions to the right people, and chances are, Madam Deputy Speaker, if you know you could walk down Broad Street into your bank and ask a question, go and ask before you provide any information to anybody. So it is important that each of us, that we alert and sensible before we are able to allow people into our systems, because once you let somebody into your secure space, Madam Deputy Speaker, you know, if we let somebody in here and they run right all about in here, after we let them in, then it's really, then we can't blame nobody because we let them in. But you must be cautious with these things, and I don't mean to sound in any way negative, but this is important because each of us conducts our business digitally all over the world. People pay on Amazon regularly and Apple and all these things, and they've got so many apps on these phones now, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the truth is you don't know what's real, because something pops up on your phone, you like it, you're accustomed playing a game, and it confusing you all the time, and you click it, and next thing you know, all of your details are available, because there are people out there, Madam Deputy Speaker, who are simply up to no good, and therefore we must work together, as the regulators have, between the Central Bank and the Financial Services Commission. If you know that you're planning to transfer money somewhere, you could call one of those institutions and find out whether the person or entity to which you are transferring any money to, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether they're legitimate, and therefore I can only urge Bajans to be sensible in that regard. Having said that, we know that we have put a very clear focus on digitization, and we have announced, I know the Prime Minister had announced in the budget in March that the tax credit with respect to digitization would expire June of 2025, Madam Deputy Speaker. We will be extending that benefit until the end of December 2025 to allow more Barbadian businesses to be able to benefit from the application of the 100% tax credit in order to be able to digitize their businesses, and to really, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be able to drive a lot of the response in the sector. And the reality of it is that we have to leapfrog a number of things, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it requires the public sector working with the private sector to ensure that the authentication and the sharing of data is going to be real, such that the ease with which we can do business in the country, the ease with which we can do business is enhanced. And therefore, these five things, Madam Deputy Speaker, will be the absolute focus in relation to what we're doing. And you know that a few weeks ago, there was a colloquium that was chaired by the Prime Minister to look at how we can reduce the amount of time it takes to get a mortgage done. And the reality of it is, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that right now it takes probably about 3 to 6 months, depending on on the institution and the legal people involved and all of that. And the reality is that we would really love to get that down to 14 days or less. But in order to do that, it means having the right data, the right systems in place, so that the unlocking of investment, private investment by Bajans, can be accelerated, and therefore driving the growth strategy. So a lot of that is digitization. A lot of that is really about how we can get people more access, using more of people's data in relation to credit reports and that kind of thing is all part of the process as to making a determination as to how many persons can access finance for a whole range of areas, not just housing, but a whole range of areas that would be critical with respect to being able to drive growth in the economy. And so the fiscal framework is really predicated on those areas. We will be focusing on a few areas in relation to trying to drive specific growth, but I will leave that for another time. But Madam Deputy Speaker, I am absolutely confident that what we have been able to achieve up until now is significant. But in order for it to be transformational, Madam Deputy Speaker, it means that all of us as Bajans, each of these areas that I highlighted here, must appreciate they're all linked, and therefore all of us now must work together in order to make the growth that we are seeing in the economy real. And therefore, I'm saying to Bajans, if you're taking your money and putting in all these schemes, just pause and look for the genuine things that are actually going to help Barbados, genuinely help Barbados. There's nothing, and I repeat it again, there's nothing that I know of that you can invest today, Tuesday, Madam Deputy Speaker, and get 100% by Friday. Nothing. Far less 200%, because if that was the case, Madam Deputy Speaker, I swear, I ain't got to hear no more. But if it was possible, the government will not have any issues with financing anything. And therefore, I can only urge Barbadians to please, let us focus. If you accept you want to make investments, let us make legitimate investments. And therefore, you are more likely to get a 10% rate of return, a 15% rate of return or something in a legitimate business over the course of a year. But nobody can give you 100% in a week, 2 weeks. It doesn't make sense, Madam Deputy Speaker. And when people find themselves caught up in this vortex, where people are telling them, oh yes man, I put in and I get. Because, you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I was to come to honourable members in here and tell each honourable member that I put in $100 Monday and get back 200 Friday, I know that every man jack in here, first of all, will take that and say, not just, I'm being very serious, Madam Deputy Speaker. Every member in here will probably take that in good faith, because I suspect they trust me reasonably in that space. And it is something that people don't understand and realize, that you are part of the bait to get other people around you to relieve themselves of that money. So if I put in $100 today and get back 200 by Friday, it means that next week I might put in 200, expecting to get 4. And then I can put in 400, expecting to get 8. And every time I put in and get back, I can tell everybody that I put in and get back. And when I put in and get back, and if we keep increasing, the people just waiting for all of us to put up that big set of money, because they are clear in the targets that they want to meet. And then all the way in here, all 30 of us in here, lick up and looking at one another, but I am the one who can say, well, I get back my money. It is true. And this is part of the scam each and every time, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I can only urge Bajans, let us focus on the bricks and mortar, the things that you can touch and feel, Madam Deputy Speaker, unless somebody is providing a service, which coincidentally, the AI training and the cybersecurity training, there are Bajans being trained through the Ministry of Education Student Revolving who are working digitally from Barbados. So they're providing a service to companies outside of Barbados in that space. So unless you're providing a service across the board, there's still some way to quantify that. But unless you can see and feel those results, and those services still are linked to something real, because it means that somebody somewhere either got a phone service with a package that says they want X amount of data or X amount of minutes or something that people are prepared to pay for. So even with services, there's still something to quantify the demand and supply, Madam Deputy Speaker, and therefore, unless the people can tell you exactly what is the good or service that this money is linked to, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm telling you, it is a scam. And therefore, please, Bajans, it is Christmas, and I don't want next year to be hearing in social media that there's another set of people who've lost money to this scheme. And don't matter how you dress it up, Madam Deputy Speaker, no matter what you call it, if it is not linked to something real, it is a scam. And therefore, this fiscal framework and strategy that we have charted for the country, if you want to invest in something, they've got too many hotels and too many companies starting up out here who need financing, who operate in the real economy. And when the Honourable Minister got the planes full coming in here, when the day come, and the people in getting off the cruise ships and coming out and spending money in the economy, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the people exporting, because when the food terminal is constructed, the growth is there within the agriculture sector, and we're exporting goods out of Barbados. These are tangible things that people can put the money in. Just the other day, you saw that Mount Gay expanded their warehouses to produce more rum, and therefore I would like to encourage Bajans, Madam Deputy Speaker, if you want something to invest in, go and buy a barrel of rum. Buy a barrel of rum, not to drink. Not to drink. Buy a barrel of rum and let it age in the same way that you will invest in government bonds. Because as the rum ages and matures, Madam Deputy Speaker, when it bottle, you get that rate of return. So I ain't telling Bajans to drink rum, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm saying there are opportunities, genuine opportunities for investment. And therefore, wherever you look, let us try to make sure that these opportunities can be made real, because it is this government's intention to include as many Bajans in the recovery, and there are many areas that people can participate, and I hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, that 2025 will see, and beyond, but 2025 and beyond, will see Bajans focusing on the things that make sense and the things that will actually help people to be able to ensure that the growth strategy that we focus on, which is really at a minimum to grow, ideally we would love to grow by 5-6% every year, ideally. But to make that work, it means people got to be putting the money to actually work for the country, not to be giving people money ever so often, and you're seeing these things on social media, Madam Deputy. So that's not driving growth in the economy. And therefore, whether it is large investment, small investment, in-between investment, whatever you call it, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to urge Barbadians that if we are going to achieve an average of between 4.5% to 5% over the course of the next 3 years and beyond, then we have to put the hard-earned monies that we have to productive use, and therefore let us do that collectively alongside government and the private sector in order to make sure that what we have charted here can be made real, notwithstanding the fact that there are lots of external challenges that the country will face, and the only way that we will face those challenges and be standing is if we come together and focus on these genuine opportunities. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Good morning, Madam Deputy Speaker, and good morning to all present, and good morning to Barbadians here and in the diaspora, and indeed during this tourist season. Good morning to all visitors whom we are happy to welcome. I rather expected a longer presentation from the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central. And in so disappointing me with a very short delivery, I want to say to you, Your Honour, that the most outstanding feature of what we've heard this morning from the Honourable Member is a presentation that reflects not much on the written document that he's brought here today. As I always say to you, I sat here and I took notes. I was moving between the document and recording what was being said orally by the Honourable Member. And I have to say to you, Your Honour, that what was being said orally by the Honourable Member, some of which I wrote, reflects very little of what is in the written document. I see it, therefore, as my responsibility to inform the public as to what has come here in writing, and I will reflect also on the oral anecdotes. That is what I call them. These days he chooses the anecdotal path. A few weeks ago, I accused the Honourable Member of abandoning his characteristic technocratic propensities and becoming more of a politician. Not that being a politician is a bad thing. I hope we are all politicians. But we do expect our politicians who are also technocrats, highly trained, as is the Honourable Member, to reflect something of the training that he has and something of the training that justifies his occupation of the office that he holds. But here is what I record. I feel obliged to deal with the written document, and I will deal with that because the public is entitled to hear what is written in this document. As I said, we did not hear much of what is written in the document because the Honourable Member now has a different course of conduct in here. That I wouldn't say that he jokes a lot these days, but the anecdotes, we hear that he doesn't have any hair now, and I don't think the public, not even his former barber, is interested in the fact that he no longer has any hair. What is important to this country is what is here, H-E-R-E, what is written here. And what is written here does not speak well for the future prospects of this country. In avoiding the written document, maybe it's embarrassment, maybe the Honourable Member is embarrassed to tell the country what is the true state of this economy. And in expressing that embarrassment, he goes to these Ponzi schemes. When the Honourable Member went to the Ponzi scheme, the word that appeared before me was sanctimony. Let me quote him. Let us put these schemes and scams behind us. These sanctimonious interventions, you're supposed to come to a house and deliver of yourself seriously as to the state of the economy. And at the center of your delivery is a reference to Ponzi schemes, and that is supposed to be the greatest national issue, the greatest national economic issue that is confronting this country. Let us put these schemes and scams behind us. What we will not put behind us and what this country will not put behind it is the mismanagement and the poor management of this economy. What we will not put behind us, Your Honor, is the fact that this economy is on the road to failure. And it is on the road to failure because government's economic policies are inadequate for prudent management of any economy, including this one. We will hear shortly that most of our Caribbean neighbors are experiencing real growth, and that they have been experiencing real growth since that benchmark occasion of the COVID pandemic. But I recorded the honorable member, again, curious language on the question of growth. Here is what my record says as to what the honorable member told this country today, and I quote, "We must make the growth that we are seeing in the economy real." Ma'am, may I read that again? "We must make the growth that we are seeing in the economy real." Well, I am not an economist. The overwhelming majority of Barbadians are not economists. But we are still entitled to ask the honorable member, how is it that we may be seeing growth, but it is not real? We don't know. That is why I said he seems to have abandoned his technocratic training, his propensity, and his learning, which we have never questioned. I respect him. I do respect him. He's a man highly trained. But he comes here this morning and tells the people of this country that we are seeing growth, but the time has come to make it real. Well, he will get up and explain after I speak what he means by that. And so he began on the Ponzi schemes, a distraction. A distraction. How have the Ponzi schemes, or the Ponzi scheme, affected government's ability to manage this economy? How have the Ponzi schemes affected the lack of access that the majority of people in this country have to government's generosity? How have those schemes affected that? That is why I'm saying to you, Your Honor, it is a distraction. And the people of Barbados must ignore that distraction. This presentation has nothing and ought to have nothing to do with the presence of any Ponzi scheme, whether present or past. Beg your pardon, ma'am. Let us put these schemes and scams behind us. If I were the politician that the honorable member has now become, I would give different definition to the schemes and scams that are with us. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. All I would repeat is that this presentation this morning, apart from being disappointing, is sanctimonious. What Ponzi scheme, what? We're not interested in those. That is not at the heart of this government's failure. But I quoted him again. I wrote another quote of the honorable members. He said, social programs. Oh, there are various social programs, but I will not go into that. Again, in a statement that is meant to give Barbadians some hope that the government is attending seriously to this economy, the question of Ponzi schemes becomes prioritized over social programs. And the reason the honorable member could not speak to social programs or refuse to speak to social programs is because they're largely